to the South Coast. And beginning on Veterans Day in 2021, we received our first Afghan family. They've been arriving between November and today. We have received 46 Afghans, men, women, and children in this area. I'm counting New Bedford, Dartmouth. Actually, there's one guy all by himself in Taunton, and we're probably going to be receiving more in a few weeks, and we're probably looking forward to Ukrainian refugees at the end of the summer. But we've received 46 Afghan refugees who settled in this area. A few have moved on to other states, California, Vermont, Texas, to reunite with other family members who are established in those states. But we still have 30 still living in this area, and that we have been helping to support. The refugees have been coming here through two different agencies. One is Accentria, the other is IINE, the International Institute of New England. They've been placing the families here. They've been helping the families get a footing here. Every Afghan refugee, man, woman, child, receives $1,225 to start a new life in America. And the community, and especially SON, have been working to help them in other ways, because it's really hard to start a new life on $1,225. So we've been working with helping the refugees find housing, we've been helping them find housing, and some of the members have even agreed to co-sign for loans because they come here without any kind of credit history. Some of them, they needed to find housing before they even found jobs. We have helped them, we helped with furniture drives and clothing drives and food drives, because a lot of them, they're eligible for food stamp benefits, SNAP benefits, but in some cases it took 3 to 4 months for the benefits to kick in. So we had food drives to help them and also to help them get gift cards so that they could go shopping for culturally appropriate food. And then we helped them find jobs. Almost all of them. There is still one more gentleman who is looking for work, and so any job leads would be greatly appreciated. We find that a lot of the Afghans that are coming here, we have people who were journalists and people who ran nonprofit organizations in Afghanistan working in factories, because these were the jobs they were able to get. We've got 2 women who were OBGYN doctors, including one who was a surgeon, and she's trying to get her medical credentials transferred so that she can practice medicine in the United States. But it's not an easy process. My father did that when my father was educated as a doctor in the Philippines, and when he came here, it's almost like you start all over again. I think we hear stories of Russian doctors and scientists who are janitors in hospitals. We have the same situation here. One of the Afghan refugees was a professor of Islamic literature in a university in Kabul. And here, it's very difficult for her to find work because she doesn't speak enough English. So we have some refugees who are very highly educated and are trying to find work that fits their background and their qualifications and their experience. And then we have others that, in some cases, it's a lot of the women who this is their first time out of the country. They maybe got as far as high school in Afghanistan. They're not familiar with handling money on their own. The network worked with YWCA to hold financial literacy classes for all the women. We taught them about the US monetary system, how banks work, how how credit and debit work, how checking accounts work. We're going to be working hopefully with Corinne later this summer. Some of them want to open businesses. One woman ran a restaurant in Afghanistan, and she wants to open a restaurant here. And we have to train her, we have to teach her, like, okay, this is what you have to do. These are all the hoops you have to jump through trying to open a similar business here in the United States. And so we're very aware, the network is very aware that assistance from the refugee agencies end after 6 months. And so a lot of them are coming up to their 6-month mark. And we are forming what's called friend circles based on a model that Catholic Charities ran in Western Massachusetts when they have a much longer history of receiving refugees in that area. And so we've actually worked with them, they've counseled us, they've advised us, and we are forming friend circles here to support these families. So once the Refugee Resettlement Agency steps away and no longer provides them with assistance, monthly stipend. The agency took the 225 that each family was entitled to get and helped them put down first and last month's rent, gave them like a monthly stipend to live on until they could get on their feet, save a little money after finding work. But once the agency steps away, some families, I think, are in a little bit better shape than others. Some still need a lot of hand-holding, and we're hoping that the friend circles will take the place and kind of fill the gap for when the resettlement agency stops being actively assisting on their cases. We're hoping to get volunteers to help families learn how to ride the bus. Help them get to English class, help them learn how to use Zoom. There are some classes available online for advanced students, but they don't know how to use Zoom. They don't know how to set up their TV sets. They didn't realize you needed cable packages before you could get. They all thought that we donated them broken TVs because they couldn't get any kind of signal. And it was like, no, you need cable. The library, New Bedford Public Library, graciously loaned them hotspots that we got through a grant during the pandemic. There were some hotspots left, so they now have cable for a few more months until the grant runs out. But we need help helping the women who are kind of afraid to go out and navigate a strange city, especially when they don't speak English. How to get to the store, by us, how to get to wherever their class, whether it's at the Immigrants Assistance Center or the New Bedford Public Schools, how to get to your English class. A lot of the Afghans didn't know how to navigate the medical system, how to make appointments, how to go get refills for prescriptions. So we need volunteers to help with that, help them sort their mail. I have brochures here that I brought explaining a little bit about the Friend Circle program. There's also contact information. And please take a brochure before you leave. And if you want to volunteer for a Friend Circle, we're launching our first Friend Circle for one particular family this week. We're hoping to create a few more. Like I said, there are currently 6 families living in New Bedford. We expect the 2 families that are living in Dartmouth to move to New Bedford over the next few months. They are currently in host family situations, but the host family agreement does run out, and they are expected to live independently and on their own, but they aren't quite at that point yet. So we will be hoping to set up a circle for every family, or someone to just a group that they can reach out to if they have questions, if they need help, and to just show support. And then finally, one other, and it's a big ask, we are also looking for financial support. The South Coast Afghan Welcome Network partnered with the CEDC. They are now our financial sponsor, which enables us to apply for grants. We've applied for a grant for the Afghan women, which hopefully if we get, will provide them some funds and training so they can launch cottage industries. A lot of them, even though they don't know how, to speak English, it's very difficult for them to find jobs outside of factory work or restaurant work, but a lot of them are very skilled craftspeople. They do wonderful traditional Afghan crafts. They want the women, while they were in their financial literacy class, all thought, like, why don't we form a co-op? We can create these Afghan crafts and then sell them on Etsy. And that's their goal. That's what they want to do. So I applied for a grant. We'll see if we get the grant. If we do, we may launch this co-op. But we're also looking for donations for educational expenses. 5 of the men are studying cybersecurity right now, and they have certification exams coming up. And so there's costs for that. The 2 women who were OBGYN doctors, for them to be able to practice in the United States, there are two medical exams they have to pass. The exams are about $1,000 each. And then they have to do their residencies on top of that before they're able to practice medicine here. And so one of the gentlemen who currently works in a factory, his dream was he worked in construction in Afghanistan at the US Embassy, and his goal, when we asked him, what do you want to do? He said that he wants to be a plumber. So we're hoping to send him to the Greater New Bedford Tech plumbing course in the fall. But again, this costs money. And finally, a lot of them have family that were stranded in Afghanistan. Either they were separated at the airport and didn't make it on planes in time, or in most of those cases, we had one case where the family got to the airport, they got separated, and one man ended up here, and his son somehow ended up on a plane to France, where he is now stuck. And so there are fees to try to bring them here. For the family members who got left behind in Afghanistan, we're going to be working to get them here on humanitarian parole visas. For the families that are here and are awaiting their approval for their SIV visas, we're looking at wait times of over a year, in some cases 2, and they're going to have to apply for temporary protected status while they're waiting for asylum claims and SIV visas to be approved. And there are fees associated with that, and so it's a lot of fees, for the families who had family members who were stranded in Afghanistan, who didn't make it out or were separated at the airport. We've heard of a woman who had 6 children and 3 of them got left behind at the airport, and they're trying to get them over here. But for every single case, it's over. Humanitarian parole is $575, and the families don't necessarily have all the funds. So we will be doing a series of fundraisers, and we're asking people, if you can help financially, if you can help sign paperwork, if you're willing to be a sponsor. There are several attorneys working on Afghan cases here in New Bedford, in the Providence area, and they all report that is one of the most difficult things. A lot of attorneys are doing the filing pro bono, but trying to get a humanitarian parole case, the refugee needs to show that they have someone who can financially support them once they arrive here. And a lot of times their families, who are refugees themselves, they don't have the credit reports or the bank accounts or the money saved. And so they're also looking for US citizens who are willing to sign the paperwork to be sponsors for these family members to bring them here so they can rejoin their families. So I know that's a pretty big ask, but whether you can donate funds, whether you can donate time, it's in volunteer work, or whether you can just help spread the news about what's happening with the relocation and resettlement efforts. Any help would be greatly appreciated. And thank you for letting us come. I mean, this helps us get the word out about the work that we're doing, and it helps us get the message out to the general public about the work that we're doing. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. Just let us know.
Thank you guys so much. That's amazing work you're doing with so much. My goodness. So we'd like to take questions from the audience. Any questions that you might have for this kind of group, which is full of answers. If we could keep the questions a little succinct. Yes, Liz.
Hi. I am overwhelmed at the incredible work you all are doing. From the grassroots training and education of women in the community to the resettlement of people who are just coming in. My question is, we're reading a lot about rape as a means of control, not just of women, but also of men. And I wondered how you're working with people who have been traumatized from war as well as any kind of sexual abuse of power.
So we have a program at the Immigrants Assistance Center. We've been at New Bedford High School for the past 7 years. We've actually been raising money to keep the program. So we have a woman by the name of Liz Lozado. We're working specifically with the unaccompanied youth. And one of the biggest things that we keep hearing, and we've been hearing for many years now, is the trauma that has happened to them, the rape. You know, these children who are coming to the border with no parents, and how they're ending up here. So we're seeing those numbers tripled at the high school. So we're hearing horrible stories, which we've been hearing for many, many years. One of the things that is, as the program is expanding, we're also going into the middle schools, and we're seeing that program with the unaccompanied youth at the high school expanding like tremendously. One of the things we are in tremendous need is we work very closely with the Greater New Bedford Health Center, and we know mental health and trauma is one thing. So we have been really searching to find a therapist or a psychologist who are Spanish speakers. But yes, we can get community health workers. But for therapy, you really need to you don't want somebody in there to translate. So we noticed that has been a huge issue that we have been working on, is to get a therapist or a psychologist, somebody who is Spanish speaking, to work specifically with this population. And the numbers it's staggering what we're seeing at the border with the kids, with the boys, girls, and that is such a huge issue. And having Liz at New Bedford High School has been absolutely tremendous, because she's in the high school. So at the beginning, we had funding from New Bedford Public Schools for 2 years, and after 2 years, they said we don't have any more money, but we knew the importance of that program, so we've been raising money to keep Liz at the high school, and that program is expanding. And mental health is the #1 reason, and why a lot of those things that you just mentioned, Liz, is what we are hearing tremendously. Another issue that we're seeing with these children who are the unaccompanied youth is the sponsors. These sponsors that are not really complying what they're supposed to be helping as sponsors, you're supposed to financially take care of these children, and they're not. So that's why you're seeing a lot of them working in these fish houses to pay for their sponsors and to send money back to Central America. So that, aside from the mental health issue, I would say the educating the sponsors, which is something we're doing one-on-one, but we're actually creating a workshop and making sure that we educate their sponsors about what exactly their obligations are as these children, as they're becoming sponsors of these unaccompanied youth. But we are seeing exactly that. One of the things that I think it's important to mention, we're working very closely with the chief of police in New Bedford, who's been absolutely amazing and said that we're willing to sign new visas. So working very closely with the district attorney office and working with the chief of police, like for example, and I'm just going to use a case, there was a case of a young man who was raped, and at that time he was actually held at the police and get this person who had to get deported. And what had happened was the mother had mental health. And the chief of police, this is several years ago, signed on to the U visa. But the kid was 13 years old. And what had happened was, because of the mental health issues with the mom, she never did anything. Meanwhile, the young man is 23 years old, and he thought he had legal status. Comes to find out he had nothing. And so what happened was, knowing that once upon a time he had a U visa that got signed by the police chief that never got anywhere. So what I did is I specifically I had a meeting with the district attorney's office, with Tom Quinn, and brought the case in, saying, we know it's expired, but this is the case. And so basically pleading with him and showing all the backup information that this case was approved, but because of the mother's mental health issues, nothing ever happened. And he did sign the U visa. So it's little stories like that. It is so important, but it takes a lot of work. So working very closely, the chief of police, we have 5 cases that I'm going in front of him to say, these are cases that we really need to really look at and see if you can sign on to a U visa. So the U visa is the district attorney can sign on, depending, and also the chief of police. So working very closely with these 2 gentlemen, extremely important to get these U visas signed. What is a U visa? A U visa is specifically if you're a victim of a crime, rape being one of them, right? You are eligible for a U visa, but you have to comply and making sure that you have all the backup information, that you're working with the police to find the person who convicted the crime. So once you do that, you're eligible for a U visa, but it's a process that takes a long time. And so it's educating the police, making sure they understand that these cases are eligible for U visa, and having the chief of police and the DA involved is extremely crucial. And so those cases, we know that are eligible, and it's just one of those things that's one by one and having these meetings. So I just wanted to mention it. They are actually they're moving up in New Bedford. So what happens, they get to the border, and then after they get in a refugee resettlement, and then they have sponsors, they have either a telephone number of someone whom they know that is living, for example, in New Bedford, and then the refugee resettlement in contacts the sponsor, and these children then end up living with their sponsors. It could be a family member, or it could be just a neighbor, it could be someone that maybe the family knows, for example, in Central America. And then when they start living with them as a sponsor, you're basically saying that you're going to take care of this young, this child who's coming through the border. But what happens is a lot of them start working. And when they start working, to help their sponsors, but also to send money back to their country, and legal fees, which we know if they're eligible for special juvenile visa because they're unaccompanied, if they've been abandoned by a parent, they're eligible for a special juvenile visa. But all of these have fees that are attached, which is, you can get a pro bono work, a pro bono attorney, which is hard to find, but you can find them. But then you have the legal fees that they have to pay, which is a lot of money, many times.
You mentioned that the mayor was very much on board with the resettlement issues. I'm just wondering on housing, does he, or does the city have like a plan for housing?
As I think Helena mentioned, New Bedford is going through a housing crisis. One of the other things that I do, besides the immigration work is actually not related to the work I do at City Hall. Besides the ESL programs, I also run a consumer protection program for the Attorney General's office. We handle consumer complaints, and we have been inundated with complaints from New Bedford, U.S. citizens, New Bedford residents who, there was a wave of evictions when the eviction moratorium ended last October. We had a wave of evictions of people who hadn't been paying their rent during the COVID pandemic. The protection ended, and then suddenly landlords were able to start evicting people. After that first initial wave of evictions, in the spring, we started to see evictions from tenants who had been paying their rent all along. Even during the pandemic, they never missed payments. And landlords were suddenly jacking up rents, $300, $400, $500 a month. And our office started getting calls from people saying, my landlord is going to raise my rent by $500 and they're giving me 30 days. Is this legal? And we have to tell them, yes, it's legal. Massachusetts does not have rent control. Landlords can charge whatever they want. So people have been going from paying $800 a month and to suddenly having to pay $1,200 a month. And then when they can't, they get evicted. In a lot of cases, landlords couldn't afford to make their mortgage payments. So investors bought the new properties, and investors want to evict all the current tenants because they're hoping to get tenants who can pay higher rents. And so we're seeing rents skyrocket in New Bedford. And just this since the fall, there were around 600 evictions in New Bedford. And so the refugees are arriving at a time where they're competing with hundreds of US citizens that are looking for rents. I don't think there is an easy answer to the housing crisis that's going on. I know that there are a couple of public hearings coming up. I think United Interfaith Action is having public hearings.
Unitarian Church.
The Unitarian Church.
Tuesday through 16, yeah, we're actually in panel.
Yeah. So there is no, I can't speak for the mayor's office as to what he's doing to address the crisis. I can only say what we're doing with SON. Like I said, some of our members have volunteered to co-sign leases for some of the Afghan families. Volunteers have been going out every time it's PACE. They publish every Tuesday, there's a list of available apartments. We've been calling landlords, we've been going and putting our names in on behalf of the Afghans, trying to help them find housing, and we're doing tours. But, we did one tour, and one landlord said, honestly, I've got 50 other people that are going to be looking at this apartment this week, and it's tough. It really is difficult. We've been lucky to find most of the apartments we have been able to find have been through word of mouth. These are landlords who are not advertising online through Zillow or Trulia or whatever, and who aren't advertising in the papers, but they've just heard through a friend who heard from another friend that, and they want to help an Afghan family. And that's how we've been the most successful finding apartments for them. They have, the agency guarantees that a lot of them are on matching grant programs, so as long as they're working or in school, there is government money to help subsidize their housing. There is additional funding coming through that should give each Afghan refugee an additional $2,000, specifically for rent that is payable to the landlord directly. So there are programs. I mean, it's just a matter of finding a landlord who's willing to take that risk to rent to someone who has no credit history yet.
The rents have doubled. So, for example, we have clients, I don't know if anyone here is from New Bedford, but there is Root Street, right? There's areas in New Bedford that is really high-risk areas that you could actually get an apartment for $700. Now it's $1,200, $1,300. As a matter of fact, one of the Afghanistan families we purchased, I think it was on South First Street. We had an apartment on South First Street, which was $1,250. Basically, the families, they had to move because, there was bullet holes outside of the house. This is an example, and the person who was living downtown had an addiction, it kept going up. So there was other issues that we're finding. But when you look at apartments in high-risk areas going for $1,300, $1,200, $1,500, it's ridiculous, and people cannot afford it. And so to me, it's like, even though the government has all these assistance programs, but what you're doing is you're putting a Band-Aid on an issue. So you're not really resolving the problem. So that's, housing is the number, I would say, right now there's a housing crisis in New Bedford, and I'm hearing this all over, so Fall River also.